Hello, everyone. It's Phil Jacobus. It's the 21st of August at 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm here in my home in Woodstock, New York. It's a lovely day, and it's going to be hard for me to work, but I'm going to do it. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Paula Williams, who is a very experienced person, architect and experienced person for building both linear accelerator sites and proton sites. And we're going to talk a little bit about carbon today, so that's very interesting. But before we do, let me show you a few interesting stories that are appearing in our online news today. First, you see that here's a story, sort of a shocking story, that 11% of second opinion radiology reports go unread, according to a study. Makes you a little nervous, I guess, especially if you're asking for a second opinion. And also, the FDA has given the nod to a Siemens artificial intelligence-based MRI system. Also an interesting story. You have to read it carefully, but it's the future. So as always, I want to encourage you to sign up for our online news. It's free. We cover things every day. You'll really be well informed if you do. Okay, everyone, as promised, today I'm joined by Paula Williams, and Paula is a principal with the company Stantec, and she's also an architect. Paula, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, Paula we're lucky to have her here today. She's a very experienced person. And Paula, I think you told me that you've been 10 years in this industry. Is that correct?
I have been 10 years designing particle therapy centers. That's been my niche as an architect in this industry. Mm-hmm.
And you've been involved in a number, off the top of your head, how many proton centers do you think you've been involved in?
I've been involved in at least 15 proton centers. Many of them have gone from design through construction and are now operating, but we've also done many other studies for clients who are considering particle therapy.
And you know, I forgot to ask, but are you also involved in linear accelerator systems, sites?
We are. Stantec is a broad healthcare firm, and we do projects in radiation oncology beyond just particle therapy. Some of our particle therapy centers actually have linear accelerators as part of their program, whether they are a standalone particle therapy center, or some of our projects have also been full-blown comprehensive cancer centers that have all modalities.
I see. And you're a worldwide organization? You've done work all over the world?
Yeah, Stantec is a worldwide healthcare firm. We have offices all over the world, and we do projects all over the world. We have over 4,000 folks in our buildings group that are architects, interior designers, and engineers. Our particle therapy practice is centered in the group that I lead in the Washington, D.C. office.
Okay. You know, we're going to talk about carbon today, but before we talk about carbon, let's just talk about how if you, from 5,000 feet in the air, can you tell me the difference between a proton site, proton therapy, and carbon therapy? Is that something that you're comfortable in just from 5,000 feet in the air?
Sure. So without getting into the clinical or physics differences, carbon, which is a heavy ion therapy, is the most potent and precise form of radiation therapy. It has those benefits over both photon and proton. Patients receive fewer fractions or number of treatments, so their treatment time is less, and they overall have less side effects. I guess the difference for us in the architecture world is the equipment and the building that surrounds it in order for the equipment to run. So that the equipment that generates and delivers the particle is highly specialized. It uses an accelerator to charge the particle, and it sends it down a magnetic beam line. So in a carbon center, this equipment is 50% larger than in a proton center, which really is due to the larger bending radius of the magnets that's required to keep that particle charged. So with that comes the need to just design things from I guess a higher capacity and higher loads, higher amount of concrete, higher amount of interaction. So that's really the main difference between a facility that's for proton versus one that's for carbon, is really related to its size.
So carbon is more robust, requires more shielding, and I can only imagine, you know, the cyclotron for a proton system is 100 tons. I can only imagine how big it must be if it's bigger than
Yes.
proton.
Yeah, so the current technology in carbon is a synchrotron-based accelerator. And so that's a series of magnets that are arranged in a circle, which is a little different than the cyclotron accelerators that are used in many of the proton systems. Although that technology is constantly evolving, and we will see, you know, different accelerators, you know, certainly come to be available that will perhaps have a reduced footprint and be more compact, like a cyclotron.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that there are more vendors selling proton than carbon, and there are more centers, established centers for proton than carbon. So that technology is improving based on economy of scale. Do we have any carbon centers in the United States?
There aren't any current carbon centers in the United States, although the Mayo Clinic has recently announced that they will be starting the design for a center for their Jacksonville campus. There are several other institutions in the US that are also very interested in adding this technology to their health systems. I think really the main obstacle to overcome is the cost of these centers and clearing the hurdle of FDA approval. Carbon treatment is not currently FDA approved. So once that hurdle is overcome and the costs come down, and I think we'll see more carbon centers arriving into the US.
And where are carbon centers now? Are there many in the world? Do you happen to know how many there are?
There are 13 in the world. A good number of them are in Japan, some in Germany. So, and eventually, and I think China has some plans as well.
I see. How long do you think do you have, this may be, you may not be able to answer this question, but do you have any idea how long you think it would take to be ready for receipt of the equipment, from the breaking of ground to ready for equipment, I think they call it? How long do you think that would take for a carbon center?
Well, it will be a bigger building than a proton center, so it's going to take a little bit longer than a proton center. So a typical, you know, large freestanding proton center takes, you know, approximately 18 months from the start of construction to that ready for equipment point of view. So, you know, depending on the methods chosen for constructing the building, I think that's probably a good estimate, 18 months to 2 years. You know, and I think what's important to understand about the schedule is when will that equipment be ready from the vendor to be installed here in the US.
And you may not know this, but you might be able to extrapolate from your proton experience. How many different departments in a healthcare facility are involved in the decision-making process for proton therapy, and do you think will be involved in carbon therapy?
Well, the champions for the technology usually come within the radiation oncology practice from both the physician and the physics side. These are big decisions and big dollars being sent. So this goes all the way up to the C-suite of a major hospital institution. Business plans are put together. There's a great deal of financial analysis that's done. So you would expect to see the radiation oncology department perhaps driving it, but there'd be a great deal of involvement from the administration of the hospital as well.
And how long does it take, in the case of proton therapy, how long does it take to prepare, to put together the plans for a proton center?
Well, as you probably know, these projects have gotten smaller over the last 3 or 4 years. I would have told you 5 years ago that it would take 10 to 12 months to go through the design phase for what at the time was a standard 4 to 5 room proton therapy center. Proton therapy centers now are often just compact 1-room centers, and those timeframes have really reduced dramatically to the 7 to 8 month time for a smaller standalone proton therapy center. I think the unpredictability of the schedule for a heavy ion center will be how quickly the vendor can develop the requirements for the design team to incorporate into the design of the building. So if the information was readily available and the interaction between design team, ownership, and the vendor was expeditious, then I think going back to those 10 to 12 month timeframes is certainly realistic to achieve.
Well, as you become involved in a carbon center, I hope that you'll reach out to us and maybe contribute something to our magazine, or maybe we'll have the pleasure of visiting with you again.
Okay, happy to do that.
It's a real pleasure to speak with you. It has to be very exciting for you to be involved in a cutting edge technology and leading a group like this. So congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for spending time with us today, and we
Happy
look
to do
forward
it.
to visiting with you in the future.
Okay.